Yeah. I'm gonna Today's daf is daf Tes Zayin in Kiddushin, as we learned for a four shlema for Elazar ben Ruben, Yosef Shriel ben Chaim Chalen, Baruch ben Ruth. Says the Gemara on the fifth line of the page. Ushtar. What did the Mishnah say? Mishnah said that an Eved Ivri is nikta b'kesef. Presumably we're talking about an Eved Ivri who was sold by Besin, or as we said, it could be sold himself. It could be acquired with kesef, or with a shtar. The shtar. Okay, maybe there's money there too, but a shtar could also the shtar can affect the transaction. In other words, he could sell himself if he's selling himself, or Bezin sells him. As we saw in Amavriya, the same thing, because Amavriya is an Eved Ivri are hukash one to another, as the pasuk says in Dvarim, right? So they're the same. So how do we know that shtar works? Amar Ulama says, so let's bring a pasuk from Amavriya. If a father sells his young daughter, Amavriya, the pasuk is of the Amkra. It says that technically, when he buys we're going to talk about Yid in a few days. Yid is if a man buys a Jewish girl, a young girl up to the age of 12, the father could sell her. And he says if he takes it, and he could marry her if he wants, that the money that he paid to the father, or for the money that he paid for the father for acquiring her, can also serve as kesef קידושין. We'll talk about if it's קידושין or even the suin. Can marry with that. And then it says if he takes another wife, he shouldn't diminish from her rights. So the Amavriya is compared to another wife. Just like another woman can be acquired with shtar, as we learned at the beginning of this masech, that Isha nikdas b'kesef shtar b'biyah shtar. Af Amavriya also mikdash shtar. She can be acquired with a shtar, and the same thing therefore would apply to Eved Ivri, right? Eved Ivri and Amavriya or hukash. Now, compare it to a shtar. When a man marries a woman, who gives who the shtar? The man. The man says, just like he gives her the ring, the man who's acquiring it does it. When you're selling a field or you're selling a car or something else, it's usually the seller is writing out the shtar. So how can we compare these two things? You're comparing it, you're saying a shtar should work to acquire the girl, just like it occurs to acquire a wife, because it's compared to a cheres yikachlo. There, the husband's buying her. Here, l'chor, it's the other way around. The father's selling her. He's running. That's fine if you hold the shtar of Riyah. In other words, when a man buys a young girl from another man, that the adon, the purchaser, is doing it. So then it's similar to a husband purchasing his wife, or acquiring his wife. Purchasing is a lousy word. Acquiring his wife. So that's a fine if you hold Lishtam Ravia Adon Kosva, the master, the one who's acquiring her, does it. So that's similar to a husband. Of course, if he's learned that the father writes it because he's selling his daughter to the man. So it's not comparable to the case of a husband acquiring a wife. Michael, what are you going to say? We have this machloka, Shtar Amavriya. Who writes it? Mi Kosvo. Rav Huna says Adon Kosvo. So according to Rav Huna, the Adon, the one who's acquiring her, writes it. So that's similar to a man acquiring a wife. The father writes it because the father's selling her. The seller, that's good according to Rav Huna. You could say, fine, it's similar to just like a husband acquires a wife. So here also the Adon acquires her, and you could say just like a husband acquires a wife with shtar, same thing with an Adon acquiring the Amavriya. So it's good according to Rav Huna. Rav Chisda, Michael, Rav Chisda says that the father writes it's not similar. Pasuk says when you have a slave girl or a boy, it says the slave girl Amavriya. She doesn't go out like an Eved Knani. Eved Knani goes out with what you call Rosh Eivar. You knock out his tooth and knock out his eye, goes out free. That's it. And an Eved Knani, a non-Jewish slave, goes out free. Not so with an Amavriya. If by accident you knock out one of her Eivarim, you do some physical damage, you have to pay the hospital bills, take care of her, but she still has to complete her term of service. So it says over there, it says she shouldn't leave out the way Avadim go out, but she can acquire the way Avadim are acquired, the way Eved Knani is acquired. And Eved Knani is nikna b'kesef shtar chazakas. We'll see later on. Umayni shtar. So we're talking about a shtar. You can acquire an Eved Knani with a shtar. Eved Knani is similar, is mukash, is compared to real estate, just like real estate is nikna b'kesef shtar chazaka. Same thing over here is nikna b'kesef shtar chazaka. So we're talking about a shtar. So how do you know that you can acquire an Amavriya and thereby also an Evet Ivri because they are Mukash. Because let's say she shouldn't go, the Amavriya doesn't go out the way an Evet Knani goes out with Shein V'ayin, with if you knock out a limb. However, you do go in that way, just like the Evet Knani can be acquired with Shtar, the same thing with the Amavriya. How do you know it's Shtar? You're saying he doesn't go out the way an Evet Knani goes out, B'Shein V'ayin, but it goes in the way. Well, Evet Knani is Nikna B'Kesef Shtar V'Chazaka, so maybe it's Chazaka. Kesef we already learned. That was the other day we learned. 2 days ago we learned the whole this about Nikna B'Kesef. But what over here are we? So maybe it's Chazaka. How do you know it's Shtar? What does Chazaka mean? This is not Cheskes Abat. We're not talking about a Chazaka of 3 years squatting on the land, which is a proof of purchase. That doesn't mean anything, right? Just squatting doesn't do anything. It's in lieu of a bill of sale. 3 years Chazaka on the land is proof of purchase. We're not talking about that Chazaka. We're talking about Chazaka showing ownership. Chazaka on a land means putting a fence up, locking the door, putting a lock on it, putting a new door up that doesn't work. Those kind of things. That shows Chazaka. Or in the case of an Evet, giving him a job to do, clean up the yard, giving him some job, that shows Chazaka, it shows ownership. Okay, so maybe we're talking about Chazaka. We're trying to prove over here, how do you know that Shtar works for an Amavri and Evet Ivri to acquire them? The pasuk says like this: when it comes to Evet Knani, you must inherit them. You must give them over to your children. Okay, that's your part of your will, your estate, etc., is to give them over to your children. They go over with the chazaka. What does that mean, Evet Knani? But not these with the chazaka. So we have a pasuk telling me that only Evet Knani is like when you give it just then osam is like osam means osam is telling you that only they are acquired with the chazaka and not Evet Ivri or Amavriya. Maybe it's how do you know? They are acquired with Kesef Shtar or Chazaka. So maybe it means only they can be acquired. Evet Knani can be acquired with Chazaka and maybe they can be acquired with a Shtar, and Evet Ivri or Amavriya would not be acquired with a Shtar. Maybe it's excluding Shtar, which is what we're trying to prove here about Shtar. So let's say about them. But it says on the other hand, they don't go out like Avadim go out, but they go in like Avadim go in, which is either Kesef Shtar Chazaka. But how do you know which one is which? On one pasuk you say they should go in this way, and the way that the Avadim are exited, or the way they go out, Rosh Evarim is not the same for an Amavriya. But they nichnas, they go in like an Evet Ivri, like an Evet Knani, which is what? Which is Shtar. How do you know? We have a pasuk is saying we're excluding one of the ways that you acquire an Evet Knani. Let's say there's 3 ways. Kesef Shtar Chazaka. Let's say Shtar and Chazaka. So we're trying to prove over here that Evet Ivri and Amavriya do go in with the Shtar. Why? Because it says, let's say they don't go out like Evet Knani, but they go in. How do they go in? With a Shtar. Yeah, we have another pasuk saying maybe it's Chazaka. No, another pasuk tell me that they don't go in with Chazaka. So we have one pasuk including the kind of acquisition method of acquisition of Evet Knani that applies also to Evet Ivri and Amavriya, and we have one pasuk excluding it. So the Gemara says, Marisa, how do you know which one to include? You're trying to say you include the Shtar and exclude the Chazaka, right? Again, Kesef for Evet Knani, Kesef Shtar or Chazaka. Evet Ivri, we're trying to prove Shtar, but maybe it's Chazaka. One pasuk includes one of the methods of acquisition of Evet Knani, one excludes it. So how do you know which one to include, which one to exclude? Mistaver Shtar you probably should include Shtar and say that Ivri could be included. In other words, they'll say it's a case of Avadim, but they are included the way Avadim come in with Shtar. Why? Shekain Mosiv Abbas Yisrael. Because Abbas Yisrael could use a Shtar to get rid of her, to use a get, to divorce her. So we find something, with over here we're talking about Amavriya, we find the Shtar by Abbas Yisrael, so rather include a Shtar. You can't acquire a woman as a wife with a Chazaka or divorce her with a Chazaka. So it's with a Shtar, so it'll probably include Shtar. I'll show you Chazaka has an added way of using something where Chazaka, a ger who who died with no family, so as the Chasam Hefka, you can acquire them with a Chazaka. So here's a Jewish person, like an Amar Brio and Eved Ivri, you could acquire them a Chasam with a Chazaka, so Chazaka applies. But you don't find anything by marriage. Acquiring the Nechassim of a ger has nothing to do with marriage, whereas at least over here, the Amar Bria is in the parsha of marriage. We're comparing it to marriage, and you could marry her with Yud, and we'd rather compare it to the case of a Bas Yisrael who exits from marriage, divorces with a shtar, so I'd rather include shtar. Iboy Sam Morak could say another reason why we'd rather include shtar as one of the methods of acquisition of Amri and exclude chazaka. We started off the daf by saying today, how do you know that she should be acquired with a shtar, Amavriya? Because it says, you take an Amavriya and maybe take it for a wife with Yid, it says, Imacheres yikachlo. It's like an acheres, like another married woman. Married woman's with shtar. Here also is shtar. So he said that only works according to Rav Huna, that the Adon writes the shtar of the Amavriya, but according to Rav Chisda, that the father writes it, so it's not comparable to a husband acquiring the wife, but at least it's good enough for this drush. You say to tell me that it's like a shtar, just like a woman's acquired with a shtar, not chazaka. Same way, the Amavriya is acquired with a shtar. And Rashi points out it's not the main limud, because as we said, the main limud, they're not similar, because according to Rav Chisda, the father who sells her writes the shtar, not the adon, not the master who acquires her. So it's not like that, but at least it's a support, since we have two psukim indicating that on the one hand, she's acquired, a number of years acquired the way Eved Kanani or Shifra Kanas is acquired. On the other hand, she's not acquired the same way. So which one do you apply it to? Shtar or chazaka, shtar in, chazaka out, or chazaka in, shtar out? The answer is shtar in, and we have support from Acheres. Ravuna, what is Ravuna? Ravuna who darshins out the whole idea of shtar from what? From the first pasuk that we brought down from Imacheres Yikachlo. What does he do with the pasuk of Lo Seitze Ketei Savadim? Rav Chisda used to say she doesn't go out. The Amavri doesn't go out like an Eviknani or Rosh Barim if you knock out her tooth or her eye, but she goes in that way. What does Rav Huna do with that pasuk? And we boil it any Yotzei very very simple. Pashim Pshat, there is no drasha. It's simply that she doesn't go out in Rosh Barim. Very simple. Lo Seitze Ketei Savadim. Eviknani goes out Rosh Barim if you knock his tooth out or his eye out or any of the other Barim. At least Rabbanan and the other of the 24 Barim, they go out. They go out free. A Jewish slave doesn't go out that way. Eved Ivri doesn't go out that way. You just have to pay their bills and fix them up. Rav Chisda, how does Rav Chisda know that? He says, you're right here. The Parshat is that. But in Kain, she can go out like an Eved Knani. My Ketseis Avadim, what's Ketseis Avadim? Shlamim Atarti. Ketseis Avadim teaches me this extra drasha that what you don't go out like an Eved goes out, but you go in the way an Eved goes in with a shtar. Okay, Avodim, when he says, let's say Avodim, Stam Eved is Eved Kanani. Eved Kanani, because by Kanan it says Eved, that you're going to be an Eved, right? Kanan was the son of who? Of Chum, right? He says that, he was cursed that he's going to be an Eved, so we call him, we saw a non-Jewish Eved is called an Eved Kanani, even though he's not necessarily Kanani. So the Mishnah said that how does an Eved Ivri acquire himself? Shanam, years, we all know 6 years, right? How do you know that? Pasuk Sheishanim Yavod Vashvias. That's a pasuk in Mishpatim. Who works for 6 years and he goes out in the 7th year. We'll see more drushes about this later on. And he goes up the Yovel. This Yovel that we're talking about, the Pasuk Pshat and Yovel, is what are we talking about? We're not talking about a Nirtza who stayed on and then he goes out at Yovel like all the kids know. We're talking about a regular Eved Ivri. If Yovel happened in the middle of the 6 years, he was sold as an Eved by a Bezin, and next year all of a sudden Yovel showed up, he goes out free. That's what the Yovel means here. Or be grown kesef, or he could pay his way out. The Mishnah said all those three. Eved Ivri, if you look back at the Mishnah and Yadalah of days, Eved Ivri, Nikta Kesef, we talked about that. Today we discussed shtar. Bekonas Asma B'Shanim, we just said, Ubi Yovel, Ubi grown kesef, by buying himself back out, paying the Adon prorated for whatever's remaining of his term of service. Amar Chizkiah. How do you know this? How do we know? We had this pasuk before by Amavriya. She can redeem herself. That means that the master has some part in it because he's making the cheshbon how much is left, and he takes the money from her for the balance of the term that she frees herself with. She can redeem herself and goes out. The same thing for an Eved Ivri. Tana, now, the Bryce learn like this. Listen carefully. Listen to this. It says here that an Eved Kanani, that an Eved Ivri, buys himself back with kesef. And Eved Kanani is your servant forever. You're never supposed to free him. You're supposed to bequeath him to your children. Couldn't think of that word bequeath before when we said this. Now, bequeath, right? That's the right word. Not inherit it to your son. You bequeath it to your son. Right? Okay. So here we're talking about how does an Eved acquire himself? Okay, bekesef, that's Geron Kesef we just said. He could buy himself back over Shavah Kesef. We will learn out of in a pasuk in a second. We mentioned it before in back of the Ches that the value of money is money too. How do we get married today? How do people get married today? With a ring, right? That's how you do the קידושין, the wedding band, not the engagement ring. The engagement ring means nothing. It means a lot to Kurt. He used to sell them, but the wedding band is the קידושין, right? That he gives a wedding band. We call it the wedding band. That's Shavah Kesef, okay? Uvishtar. Now, we said here, Konasasmo, you can buy himself back. Wait a minute. We're talking about not acquiring or getting married. We're talking about how does the Eved go free? Either buy his way back, whatever is remaining on his term, prorated, Uvishava Kesef, or a prorated amount of value of money, which is just like money. Uvishtar. Shtar. How does an Eved if he goes out with a shtar? We'll see. Bishlam Kesef, the Siv Mekesef Knaso, right? We said that pasuk is really said by what? By you sell yourself to a goy, but there's we had the Xavier Shava of Sachar, so we learn out one from the other. Shava Kesef Nami, Yashav Gulasam Rachmana. Pasuk says there's an extra word over there. We're talking about being Poda. It's not even by right there. It says Yashiv Guulasa. He'll return his Guula. That extra word teaches me the Rabba Shava Kesef. So we always know that Shava Kesef is like Kesef, right? The value of money, goods, item, whatever goods, is like money also. Ella high star, but it means goods. It means real things. We talk always about goods and services. Services wouldn't do it. It's got to be some goods. Ella high star. What kind of a star here? Never even goes a star. Even the costly star doesn't mean that maybe the Eved says, look, I have no money right now, but I got 3 years left. You bought me for $100. I sold myself to you for $100, or they sold for $100. 3 years left, $50. Okay, I don't have the money right now. Will you accept an IOU? Right? Will you accept a check, a post-dated check? That's what a shtar is. What is a check except a post-dated check, or a post-dated shtar? So Elaim the Kasale shtar, Adam go to shtar, Hainu Kesef. That's the same as money. You gave him the money. He's buying himself back with an IOU. Ela Shichur. It means Shichur. It means that the Adam wrote him a freedom slip, gave him his freedom. He says, okay, behold, I'm freeing you. So shtar lami, what is it? Shtar. Let him say in front of 2 witnesses just to be sure. Still get out of here. You know, in front of a bezin. Still get out. You're free. Let him just go. And as if the Adam wants to free him and say, look, you don't have to work for me anymore. That's fine. What does he need a shtar? Big chiddush over here. Eved Kanani, we know you own his body, right? Here's a chiddush that Eved, while he's in servitude, he's owned by the master. But Rav Shapiro, it's not enough to say you don't have to pay. I'll tell you, you worked for me. I bought you for $100 for 6 years. 3 years have gone by. That's enough. I'm meichel the rest. Even though originally you bought me, you paid whatever it was, 16 2/3 dollars per year for 6 years, and you've worked only 3 years. I'm meichel the other ones. That's not good enough. You got to give him shtar shifra to go out. Either he buys himself back with money, or if Yovel hit or something like that, right? Or 6 years hasn't happened, he can free. No, you got to give him shtar shifra.
How do we learn that from Gufa?
Oh, no, that's Gufa Kana. That's, in other words, he's saying that based on the idea that he goes out with a shtar. Why does he need a shtar? Why does it? And every time we understand, you own him. You could sell him, right? You could sell somebody else. So you own him. You have to bequeath him to your son. You don't free him. It's also to free him, right? So we own him. But Eved Ivri, would you say that he owns him? It's mashma that you do. That's why he says according to.
If he does own him,
yeah.
Why does he need a shtar?
To free him, because that's the point. That's what
I'm saying. I don't understand
why he needs it. Just the opposite. Since he owns them, he needs a shtar to get rid of them. He just can't say you're out. Just like you can't tell. If you own your wife, you have to give her a gift. Yeah.
Why? That's a
yeah.
If you own a pot.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You want to get rid of it.
Right.
Let's make it happen.
You could be mafker, right? But you can't be mafker here. Hefker doesn't work here. He's not hefker. An inanimate object, you can be mafker. You can't be mafker a person. It's not hefker.
A cow.
Yes, but not a person. Okay.
How do we know that? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, because I guess it's logical. He's not hefker. He can't be owned by, because somebody else can't just take it.
If Gufo Kondo,
So, yeah.
In Yeshiva, you say it works the same way as Kiddushin. Kiddushin, just like Kiddushin, you can't just can't get rid of the wife. You can't just say go.
But I'm saying you're right. Even if I grant you that Kiddushin is different, even if you say Kiddushin is different, the idea over here is he can't be made hefker. You own him only. It's not hefker in this. You don't own him in the sense that you could do with him as you want. Let me put it that way. It's an ownership, but it's not like an Eved Kanani that you own literally, and you can't get rid of him. Well, you can give him a get shiur also. You could. But here also we're saying Eved Ivri is like that. He owns him. Now, that's a big chiddush. We wouldn't say that. We always say, for example, he's chayiv in all mitzvahs. You can't prevent him from doing things, etc., like that. And Tosfos goes into that whole thing. And Tosfos says, well, why isn't it mentioned in the Mishnah then? The Mishnah doesn't say anything about he goes out with a star. Eved Ivri nikah because of star. Like, well, that's b'shadim the overgrown kesef. Doesn't mention anything about a star. Seikim v'shichur. So Tosfos comes out at the end. So he says maybe it's a machlokes. And Tosfos said no. Maybe in the Mishnah it's not written down because the Mishnah only mentions things that are done against the will of the master. In other words, if 6 years comes up, I'm going out free. I don't care if the master wants me to stay on. Too bad. Or if Yovel comes up, or if I want to buy myself back, I'm entitled to do that, even against the will of the master. But over here we're talking about where the master gives him his freedom by giving him a get. So the Mishnah doesn't include that. So according to this, we're saying there's no machlokas. And really, while the Eved Ivri is in servitude, he's owned by him. So you're asking, why can't he just be mafker him? It doesn't work that way. He can't be mafker. Look, an Eved Kanani also, you can't be mafker. Think about it, an Eved Kanani, which you're supposed to bequeath to your son. You're not supposed to sell him, but you can't be mafker him. Maybe there's an idea that hefker doesn't work on a person, on an individual, on a human being. Yeah. Okay. You say love. So then the Mishnah goes Muslim. You say love Avriya. So we said Avriya has an additional way of getting out. How does it? What's her additional way? Simonim. She goes out when she's 12 years old, automatic. And these are things against the will of the master, even if it's against the will. Amr Shlakish. Amr Vriya, listen to this. Resh Lakish says a big chiddush over here. We're going to slug him up, but he says this. Amr Shlakish. Amr Vriya konis asma b'misa sa'av mishusad. If her father dies, now her father sold her already, and we'll see later on he can't sell her again. And there's going to be a whole shiloh of just, let's say she goes out at 12, can he marry her off at that age? Remember, he has rishus to marry off till 12 and a half. But has he lost his rishus over her? Well, not for financial matters, as we'll see, because if the father's still alive and she leaves at 12 years old and you get a ma'anak, remember they all get that nice pizzuyim gift? They give you like a gold watch, the things that you get when you forget your freedom goes to the father. Can he marry off? We'll talk about that. But he's a big chiddush here. The father sells him to the Adam, and then the father dies. She goes out free. Big chiddush. We understand if the Adam dies. By the way, the Mishnah doesn't mention Adam dying. Mentions it when it comes to the Nirtza, not for the Amavriya. That's a little bit of an issue. We'll see if the Gemara later on discusses that. The Gemara discusses it on Amid Beis, but the Mishnah doesn't mention that she goes out with Mrs. Adam, right? But here he's telling you, but she does go out with Mrs. Adam. That's a fact. But the Mishnah doesn't mention it. We'll see if we can come up with a reason why the Mishnah doesn't mention it. But he says that if the father dies, he sells his 9-year-old girl to this guy to work for him, right? To work for this new Adam. Now she has to work till what age? Till 12, right? But if, let's say, at 10 years old the father dies, she goes out free. Says Rish Lakish is a big chiddush. Where does he get that from? Kal v'chomer. Listen to this. Which don't take her out of Rishus. When she turns 12 years old, does she leave the Rishus of her father? No, the father's Rishus over till 12 and a half. Break Nadara, marry her off, etc. Paycheck, everything. And takes her out of Rishus. Misa, Misa takes her out. If she doesn't have a father, right? So she nobody has Rishus over. The brothers don't own her. Right? If she lost her father as a young girl, 9, 10, 11, even 12. 12, she could do her own maasim already count, because she's bat mitzvah. But nobody. So misa mashumatsushasaf, edidin shemashusasaf. And that's if simanim which don't take her out of shus, so the father take her out of the shus of the adon. Misa, the death of the father, which takes her out of the shus of the father, certainly should take her out of the shus of the adon. That's his kal v'chomer. We'll see now. So Rish Lakish says that if the father dies, she goes out of Shusah. Big Chiddush. Meisvei. Rav Hoshia, Mishnah said, Yisrael Omavriya. So when she goes Asma B'Simonim, she goes up with them. B'Misa, this and that, Mishnah, why does she say Mishnah? Why does the Mishnah say she goes out with B'Simonim, she's 12? Also goes, according to you, she goes out with the death of the father too. So it's Ton of a Shiur. Okay, Ton of a Shiur always means what? He didn't list everything. He left out something. So it's always, the Gemara always says what? If you left out one thing, you must have left it out on purpose to exclude it. If you left out more than one thing, so you didn't list everything. So you must have left two things, two or more. So what else did you leave out? A ton of a Shiur. You left over some things. My Shiur, Daisha. What else did you leave out? Again, if you only left out one thing, that's an exclusion. If you left out two or more, you didn't list everything. Shiur Misas Adon. Oh, he left out Misas Adon. As we just said, the Mishnah didn't mention Misas Adon. If the Adon dies, see, by an Eved Ivri in his first 6-year term, as we'll see, if the father dies, the son works. The Eved Ivri belongs to the son, not to a daughter or not to other relatives. If there's no son, then he goes out free. But if there's a son in the 6-year term, he goes. If he's a nirtza, if he was right nirtza, if he had his ears pierced and he stays on after 6 years, then if the Adon dies, he goes out free, just like Yovel. Okay, but an Amavriya goes out Misadon, says, I'll tell you what he left out. He left out Misadon. Even Shemisadon will shine why? They keep it Ikanami Be'ish Loktani. Since that applies to a man as well, so it doesn't work. Now, what do we mean it applies to a man also? The near tsunamios Misadon. They know but it's a ben kivetnamasis. So since it applies to a man also, we're saying what applies to a woman more than a man? Simanim. Well, what about Misas Adon? Well, Misas Adon does apply to a man in a case of a nirtza. As I said before, if it's a case of a 6-year, an Eved Ivri in a 6-year term, he doesn't go out free Misas Adon because he works for the son if there's a son. So he says, in other words, now this really is the answer to my question. Why isn't Misas Adon mentioned? Because it says Yisera Alav Amavriya. What is the Amavriya over and above the man? She goes out with Simanim. A man doesn't go out with Simanim. A man doesn't go out when he's 13 years old. Whereas Misadon does apply to a Nirtza. Okay. That's why it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah, even though Misadon applies, to a Nirtza. Okay. So why don't you mention Misas Ha'av? According to Rish Lakish, that Misas Ha'av takes her out of the Adon. Why does it mention? It says Tana Sheish Lo Kitz. So the Charitza Kashi gets Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says no. Tana Davar Sheish Lo Kitz. You only mention things that have a fixed period of time. For example, 6 years. Yovel. Grown Kesef, you can do whatever you want, right? It's got a time, things that have time. Simanim have a time. Misa, you don't know when it's going to happen. So the Davar Shein Lo Kitzvah Lo Tani. But Simanim Bein Lo Kitzvah. Simanim, you don't know when the pubic hairs are going to arrive. It has no Kitzvah, right? Biktani, that's mentioned. So don't say you only mention things that have a fixed period of time. There is no upper limit, meaning if a boy or a girl reaches the age of 12, girl 12 and a boy 13, we don't know when their pubic hair is going to arrive. Okay, today we go bust a robe and we assume they all have it, but it can come at any age. They're really technically not bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. They only got their puberty at 15, let's say, then that's what it is. So there's no limit above, but there is a lower limit. What do we say? Lamata, there is a lower limit. What do we mean by that? The Tanya, let's say a 9-year-old boy brought 2 saras, Shuma, 9-year-old boy, up until the age of 9, it's not considered puberty. It's considered just like a mole. If a person has a mole on his skin, sometimes hair grows out of it. So that's just a mole. If you're from 9 until 12, then they're still there. That's also a mole. If that's a simon already. It means if those simanim stayed until the age of 13, that's a simon. Then if he's 13 years old, then divriyakol simon, it's a simon, even if they fall off. If he had puberty at 13, if at 13 he had 2 new hairs, even if they fell off, that's considered a simon. But the point is that you see over here, there's a lower limit. Anything below the age of 9 is not a simon. So there is a limit here. There is a kitzvah here. So that's the kash. Okay. So you answered Rish Lakish. Again, Rish Lakish says it's big chiddush that if the father dies while his daughter's in servitude, she goes out. So the chara, what do you mean? Our Mishnah doesn't mention it. So he said, the Mishnah doesn't mention it because there is no fixed period. When a death, there's nobody else when they're going to die. So the Mishnah doesn't mention it, even though it does mention it regarding the nirtza, right? Misas Adon. Doesn't mention it there, but okay, at least for the first part, it doesn't mention that. Masav Rav Sheshes is another kasha. On Rish Lakish. Rav Shimon Omer, Rav Shimon's going to say this. Dal Manikama. There are four. Remember, we said yesterday, according to the Tanakhama, there's differences between a man who sells himself versus Bezdin selling him. Okay, there are four people who get the Hanakah, right? Hanek, well, you have to give them a gift when they leave. Who are the four servants? Gimel Beish. She doesn't say who they are at this point. We're going to assume what they are, but three apply to out of the four. Three apply to a man. The Gimel Beisha, 3 line. There's not four, all four don't apply to either a man or a woman. Why? The fisha ain't simon beish, right? So one of the ones obviously is simon. When she goes out at 12 years old, she has to get the manak, and that doesn't apply to a man. And the other one is a nirtza, which only applies to a man, not to a woman. A woman is not nirtza. Okay. Why don't you mention misa up also? Why don't you say that when the father, if her father dies, she also gets something? Why don't you mention that one too? And Rashi says over here, what are the four? Right, Rashi tells us right away, kasal kadaitach, that what are the four? Rashi a little bit below. One is a Yotze B'Sheish Shanim, right? Goes out 6 years, and one is 6 years. One is Yovel, right? They both go out Sheish Shanim or Yovel. If Yovel hits the middle of the 6 years, or Nirtza, Shiotze Misa Sa'adon, and Nirtza goes out with Misa of the father, and Simanim Mavriya. So what the first three apply to a man: Shanim, Yotze Yovel, and Nirtza. What applies to a woman? Sheishanim, Yotze Yovel, and Simanim. Nirtza doesn't apply. That's what we're assuming right now. So why don't you, according to Rish Lakish, say there's another one? There is four, right? There's if she goes out if her father dies. Why don't you mention that? So maybe you left out some ones. It says four. Tosfos says over here, it's not from the Arba that you're saying dafka four and not more, because he brings proof from elsewhere that even when you mention a number, you could still add some more, right? You could still say ton of a shire. So he says over here, near the Daik Tani, not from the fact that you said there are four people, it's just Dalad Manikinlo, there are four that you give a gift, and you can't say Tani. No, you could say Tani Shire if you say Damkin, but the point is, it says, you said, because it says, you can't have four by any of them, because there's only three to a man and three to a woman. So that exclusion, you say you can't have four. That shows you dafka four. So v'chitem ton of Shiur. So v'chitem ton of Shiur. He said only four, no more. So maybe you'll tell me, I'll tell you why. Because again, death doesn't have a fixed time, so therefore he didn't mention it. But simanim beinlan kitzvah, simanim have no fixed time. We don't know when it's going to come, right? But Tani was mentioned. Rav Safra, like Rav Safra said at the bottom of Amanal, from the top of Bezir, that it doesn't have a fixed time above. There's no upper limit. We don't. If a boy or a girl didn't reach puberty at the age of 15, maybe they'll get it at 16, at 17, whatever. There's no upper limit. There's no fixed time, but there is a limit. There is a limit on the bottom. Any puberty, any signs of puberty below the age of 9 are meaningless. So there is a limit there. So what about Misas Adom? What about if the death of the Adom, and there she goes out free? Biktani, that was mentioned. No, Misas Adonami Loktani. Misa was not mentioned. Misa is a Loktani. So what are the four? In other words, going to say Misas Adon has no fixed time, and that was mentioned, and therefore you can't say that it's a business of kitzvah. It's only things that are time. Misas Adonami Kitzvah. No. Is Misadan also not one of the four is not Misadan. What are the four? Shanim v'Yovel Sharitzi of Amavri of Basimanim. We mentioned before in Rashi that the Havmina was that one of the four was when the Adon dies, a Nirtza, where the Adon goes out, right? And the Nirtza she also Misa Adon. The girl doesn't have a Nirtza, so that one doesn't apply to her. Now we're going to say no. There is four, but the four doesn't include Misas Adon at all. What are the four? Shanim, right? One, the Yovel, and Yovel Shoritzia. There's two Yovels. There's a Yovel that hits the middle of 6 years, and there's the Yovel that applies to a Nirtza. And those are the four that we're talking about, right? And therefore, so Yovel Shoritzia doesn't apply to a girl, and Siman don't apply to a boy. So, and therefore we're saying, so what's the answer here? The truth is that even if you say that he only mentions things that have a kitzvah, but Misas Adon doesn't have a kitzvah, Misas Adon is not mentioned. And according to this, we're saying, he mentions these four things, 3 apply to man, 3 apply to woman. Misas Adon is not included. Misas Adon doesn't have a kitzvah, and it's not mentioned. He can't afford any of them. Right? If you hold what? If you hold of Misas Adon, there's 4 other women also. Shanim, Yovel in the middle of the 6 years, Simonim, and Misas Adon. Everybody agrees that the Misas Adon applies to an Amavriya. If her Adon dies, she goes out free. It said it's not mentioned in the Mishnah because it says the Yisrael, because Lashon of Mishnah is what a woman has over a man, that's Simonim. And Misas Adon is not mentioned. But why isn't it mentioned? Because maybe it doesn't have a fixed time. So therefore, Misa also Arba Yefor Shmamina. So you see that you don't mention Misa at all, both for Misas Adon and for Misas Ha'av. So therefore, it's not a kasha on Reish Lakish. Why? Because the reason he doesn't mention Misas Ha'av is because Misas Adon is also not mentioned because it's Davar Shein Lo Kitzvah. Okay, so far we haven't shlugged up Reish Lakish, but now we will. Masav Rav Amram, the beginning of that brisa, we started this brisa saying Rav Shimon said that there's 4 manikin, 3 by a man, 3 by a woman. And we debated what the 3 were, what the 4 were. Here, at the beginning of the brisa says like this: the following are the people that get the 4. The first part of the brisa says who they are. Hayotze b'shanim, number 1. Uva Yovel, number 2. Misas Ha'adon. Here he says Misas Ha'adon. Ba'amavriya b'simonim. Now Yovel would apply, both Yovels. The Misa and this Misa, according to Reish Lakish, Misas Ha'av also sends her out. You left it out. But Eluktani says these mashma no more. Maybe see you only mention things kitzvah, but Simonim they in kitzvah and Simonim don't have a kitzvah but Tani in London. So Rav Safra is just going through it, but it's obvious what the answer is going to be. You mentioned Misas Adam. Rav Safra, like Rav Safra says that Simonim do have a limit on the bottom, so there is a kitzvah there. So he can Misas Adam. But you mentioned Misas Adam here at the beginning of the Bible says one of the 4 is Misas Adam. So you can't say you don't mention things that don't have a kitzvah. Misas Adam doesn't have a kitzvah. And according to Reish Lakish, Misas Ha'av also should apply. If the father dies, she should also go out free. We've slugged up Reish Lakish now. So the Gemara now says, well, Reish Lakish Kavachomer, but he had a Kavachomer. What do you say about that? Kavachomer. It's a refutable Kavachomer. Why? Why? You can ask for the Kavachomer. What was the Kavachomer? Madach Simonim, which don't take her out of what? Don't take her out of the rishus of the father, take her out of the rishus of the Adon. Death, which takes her out of the rishus of the father, should certainly take her out of the rishus of the Adon. Death of the father should certainly take her out of the Mal Simonim. She can't stand the goof. It's different Simonim because her goof has changed. So there has that strength over it, and therefore you can't let a Kavachomer from Simonim to death of the father. She can't understand the goof. The father died, doesn't have any physical effect on her. Tanichade. Now we're going to still say we'll take it at the end because we're running out of time. We'll take it at the end, Bishop. Tani Chada, one Bryce said, Anak Eved Ivri La'atzmo. The ma'anak that an Eved Ivri gets when he goes out after 6 years, a Yovel, he gets it himself. Anak Amavriya La'atzmo. And the gift that she gets, she keeps it herself. If she goes out, she keeps it. Tani, another Bryce says, Anak Amavriya Mitziasa. The Anak of Amavriya goes to her father, Mitzias, and then anything she finds while she's an Amavriya goes to her father. Meaning, if she finds an idol, she finds a diamond ring on the street while she is an Amavriya, the Adon doesn't get it. Her father gets it. What does the Adon get? Just the time that she spent picking it up, a paycheck for the time that she wasted doing that. Okay, but the point is, one Brisa says she keeps her manak, one says the father gets it. My love, hard enough give a simonim. If she went out with simonim, right, then she gets it. Hard enough give misa up. Mashma one, she went out with misa. If she went out with simonim, then what? Then she keeps it. If she went, then if she went out with simonim, then the father keeps it. Hard enough misa. If she went out with the misa, she went out. The father's not here, so she would keep it. It's mashma that she goes out the misa sa'av. If the father dies, it's a proof to what we just slugged the Reish Lakish, mashmir like Reish Lakish, that she goes, no, even enough to in both cases she went out when she was 12 years old. If she has a father, the father still has rishus of her money until the age of 12 and a half. That's what I'm saying. Both cases, she can't go out. If the father dies, that doesn't free her. If the other dies, that frees her. If she was 12 years old, that frees her. She went out at 12 years old. If she has a father, the father will get her manak. If she has a father, she'll keep. We understand why Amavriya gets it, right? Atzma keeps it. Lemute achim, that I said. Her brothers don't get it. The time you bequeath these slaves to your sons, your Evet Kanani. Oh, some of them Evet Kananim go to Evet Kanani or Shifra Kanas goes to your sons, to your children, you bequeath it, but not your daughters. Your daughters don't go to your sons; they don't own them. So Mikanshe, no, the Morish schus bitol, no, the schus, the financial interest that he has in his daughter does not go to his son. Elanaka Evet Atzmam Pshita. We say over here, the Brisa said the manak of an Evrivi, he keeps it. The nak of an Amavriya, who does that go to? She keeps it, right? She keeps it. Another Brisa said that it goes to her father, so it makes them sure she has a father, doesn't have a father. Fine. But Amavriya Latzma is excluded to herself. She has a father, that her brothers don't get it. But a nak of an Ivri goes to himself. Who else would it go to? Pshita Ela Laman, to who? Like a typical Jewish answer, right? Who then? Who then? Who then? Like, who else would it go to? Rav Yosef Yud Karas Karchasinach. I see here a mountain made out of a molehill. A Yud, the little Yud Karas Karchasinach. I saw it turned into a big city. In other words, Enochanami, he just was he added extra things. He says the manak of an Ivri he keeps, the manak of an Amavriya she keeps. Of an Ivri it's obvious. Who else would it go to? He owns himself. Abai says no. I'll tell you a different answer. Amar Abai Amar Hachim Rav Sheshes. I'll tell you the chiddush is a money to toihu. It goes like to toy. It was a tana. The tanya to toy omer. What does it say? Lo labal chov. Here's what it means. It goes to him, not to his balchov. Meaning that if he owes money to somebody else, you can't give the money to him. Remember, we normally will like Rav Nosson. Well, it's what if A owes money to B and B owes money to C, so A can give the money directly to C. Not with an Evet Ivri though. When his manak, you can't give that to them because it's learned out from the pasuk that it goes to him and not to anybody he owes money to. Mitzvah like Rav Nassan, also low, right? It comes to him, you give it to him and not to the Balchov. So there is a chiddush. We say that he gets the manak, meaning him and not his creditor. Gufa, go back to the Bryce that we've mentioned twice already in this page. Elu manikalem, these are the ones who get the ma'anak when they go out. Hayotz v'shanim goes out with 6 years. Ubi yovel, if yovel could be both yovels. Ubi misas adon, if the adon dies. But amavriya b'simonim, right? Right? It goes to Simon. Now, and we said, okay, we'll talk about Avu Barech, he runs away. Let's say he escaped, an escapee doesn't get a manak. The Yotze Begor Kesef, or he pays his way out, doesn't get money there. That's the Tanakh Saving. Remember, Barech, if he ran away, you're not going to give him a gift. He escaped, escaped convict, and you're going to give him a gift. No, the Yotze Begor Kesef Manikalo, because he's entitled to that. So he's still, he just paid his way out. He's still entitled to manak. Shimon Omer, Arba manik, and this is what we started off from the top of the page. 4 get a manak, shlosha b'ish v'gimel isha. Reb Shimon didn't say which ones they were. We first thought it was this, and we came out that it's shanim yovel shavatzi and amavri v'simanim. Yeah, tiyochol ma'arba bech, and you can have 4 by any one of them. Fisha ain't simanim b'ish. Man doesn't go out with simanim. Ritzia b'ish doesn't apply. Minari mili. Where do we get this all from? So we're going to start talking about the whole thing. Maybe only a person goes out at 6 years old. Pasuk in Dvarim talks about he goes out at 6 years old. 6 years old, after 6 years, to Hanek Tanek Lo, give him. But now Rabbi Yosef Yovel, how do we know that if he goes out with Yovel, right, at Yovel, Nirtza, or if the Adon dies in the case of a Nirtza or the case of Amavriya, or an Amavriya, Misad applies to the Nirtza and Amavriya, how do we know they also get? How do we know that they all get when they go out for whatever these reasons are? Yovel, Misas Adon by Nirtza and Amavriya B'Simanim. A double lashon. It says on it says and that's maybe you should include even an escapee. Obviously, an escapee who you later found. How are you going to give it to him? You wire him the money. Maybe if you sent him away. You sent him away. Yotzav Barech, who ran away himself, Yotzav Kesef, who bought himself out, changed him. Meir Omer, no. Barech, if he ran away, obviously you didn't send him away. You don't have to give him the Shluchim Yimach. But if he went out by paying his way out, his prorated remaining term, you did send him away because he paid his way out, and you sent him away. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, even if he escaped, he still owes you that other time. If he worked for out of 5 out of the 6 years, and he escaped after 5 years, and he's brought back, he has to complete the 6-year term. And at the end of the 6 years, you should give him a manak. So what's the difference if he's Barech or not? Barech Hashlama boy, the tiny Manam Barech Shechayv Lashim, he has to complete his term. Tamalom Shayshanim Yavod, he has to work for 6 years. Yachal Afilu Chala, I might think even if he was Yachal Afilu Chala, I might think even if he was sick in the middle of the 6 years, he has to be mashlim for the time that he was sick. Tamalom Shvias Yetze, after 6 years, he goes out. He goes out free. So what do you see over here? That why do you say that a Barech doesn't get Manak? Yes, he does have to complete it. He escaped, and then Yovel, before he was brought back, before he was found, Yovel half in the middle, so he never completed the term, right? So in that case, that's what we mean Barech doesn't get the Ma'anak. Now the same whole Vapik Yovel, since Yovel did happen now, Shiluch he would have been freed anyway, so it's considered like you sent him away. Below Nikna saying we shouldn't fine him and take away his Ma'anak, and take away his gift. Binanically, we should Kamash one that we don't. So Barech, everybody agrees doesn't get. Giron is a machlokus over here, right? Rav Shimon says there's only 4, and he doesn't include Giron or Barech, right? Amar Mar, wait, let's understand something. Okay, so number 1, we see who gets the Ma'anak, and now we have this whole discussion about that. But we did slug up Rish Lakish, right? Now, Amar Mar, Yochel Afilu Chala, say, I might think even if he was sick in the middle of the 6 years, that he has to make that time up. He has to be mashlim, just like he is just like an escapee. He goes out in 7th years. Even if he was sick the entire 6 years, he goes out in the 7th year. By the time we learn, he was sick out of the 6 years. He was sick for 3 years, and he worked for 3 years. And he has to be mashlim it because he worked half of it. If he was sick the entire 6 years, he has to make it up. So how do you say over here that if he was sick the entire time, he goes out anyway in the 7th year? When he said he was sick the whole years, all the 6 years, he goes out in the 7th year anyway. He did some minimal work. He did some tailoring. He didn't do heavy work in the field, but he did some work. That's what we mean over here. So that's what it means. When we say 3 and 3 means he didn't do any work for the 3 years. Wait a minute. We have a Kashi Mineu Bay from this last brisa. You say if he was sick half the time, he doesn't have to be mashlim it. If he was sick the whole time and he didn't do anything, he has to be mashlim. If he was half the time, he doesn't have to be mashlim because he at least worked half out of the 6 years. Ha'arba, but if he was sick for 4 out of the 6 years, for most of the 6 years, chayv lashlim. Aim Sefer, then the Sefer says chalak kol sheish. If he was sick the whole time, chayv lashlim. Hadal, but he was only sick for most of the time. Ain't chayv lashlim. We're talking about he didn't do anything at all. So while he was sick, if he was sick for most of the time, meaning more than 3 years into the 4th year, it's as if he was sick the entire 6 times, and he has to be mashlim. Obviously, he only has to be mashlim whatever time he didn't work. Okay, that's if he didn't do anything at all. However, if he did minimal work like tailoring, that he would be also there too. But this discussion is not over yet. We're going to come to continue more. Question. Now we have
my question was, we seem to be making an assumption here, which I'm not sure why. Rish Lakish is talking about Yitzia.
Yeah.
And you slug him up to the Manak.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Complicated here towards the end because there's a machlokas between Manak. There's no
machlokas.
Why are we making the assumption?
No, but there's no machlokas about a Ma'anak, about a Yotze B'Simanim. The question over here was, yeah.
We're asking the questions on Rish Lakish.
Right.
Rish Lakish's Mamar is about Yitzia.
No, it's the same thing because the Manikaland, because the question is because the following go out, who gets a Manak? Shanim, Yovel, Misas Adon, Al Mavriya. Why isn't Misas Ad mentioned too? If she goes out anyway, she goes out for Simanim. She goes out the Misas Adon.
Because they're talking about these things are all about Manak. You could say
that. But
you could say that.
Right. So why?
You won't get a Manak, but he will go out.
But there's no svara for that. There's no svara for that. Why would she? If the father dies, why wouldn't she get a Manak? She goes up to Simanim. She goes up Misas Adon. She goes up to Shalom. She goes, why wouldn't she get the Manak? Why? You're equating the Misas Ad with Misas Ad. Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the situation with the...
No. But Misas Ad, why should she?
The other one have to pay when the father died?
Why should he have to pay when he died? Why should he have to pay his money? That doesn't make it. No, he's not paying it. He's not paying it.
I'm just trying to understand why.
No. Yeah, that's not. It's a svara, but it's not as far as shemachalei. If she goes out, she goes out. Shanim Yovel Misa Adon Amabriya. She goes out,
I think
and she gets a Manak. Yeah, that's why I say that's right.
What I'm asking is why aren't they?
Yeah, no, why wouldn't you say maybe she shouldn't get the mana? You're saying she should go out, but she shouldn't get the mana.
I mean, they're talking about two different
Rish Lakish doesn't make that difference. Rish Lakish says that going out, just like going out by Misa Sa'adon, she should go out over here also. Misa, he didn't make that difference. If he would say, okay, she's a little bit like that, but not the whole way, you could say, but he doesn't make that
still
difference.
the very end when we started talking about the machlokas about Yiraon.
Yeah.
It was maybe I don't know, more or less of a question. Then when it's brought in at the end again, because I was saying to myself the whole time before you said we don't have time, I was saying to myself, but there's Yiraon. In other words, which Rish Lakish doesn't mention either. I mean, in other words, there is a Yitzhak.
No, Rish Lakish is that Rish Lakish is not complete to mention everything there, but the Giraon is Giraon is a machlokas. No, Giraon is
about Yitzhak.
No.
But
But she goes out with Giraon for sure. She goes out with Giraon. Everybody agrees that the other goes out. There's no machlokas about that. Okay, so that's machlokas about the manak. But to your first point,
all the questions are from manak.
I understand. No. But there's no question. There's no question on Rish Lakish from Giraon. There's no question about that. Everybody agrees she goes out. Rish Lakish is talking about when does she go out. So if she goes out, his point is I add on Misa Sa'av to the other things. And you're saying the question was, well, maybe the question is from Manak. Maybe that's only about Manak, but there's no reason to make a difference there. Rish Lakish doesn't make that difference. If Rish Lakish would make a difference, so you could say, there's the difference. Rish Lakish doesn't make them. She goes out just like Misa. Rish Lakish equates Misa Sa'av with Misa Sa'adam. And Misa Sa'adam, everybody agrees she would get the Manak. There's no reason why she wouldn't get the Manak according to Rish Lakish with the Misa Sa'av.